Welcome to the Boston Globe's Black History Month Film Festival and a discussion on Together, 6 feet apart. I hope everyone can hear me. Is everyone am I live? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. It is great to have everyone here. Hope you're doing well. Another day in a quarantine, but it's good to celebrate and also good to have something to get the wheels turning and have a great discussion about. I'd like to welcome Jay Paris, Anna Meyer, Greg, and Amanda for what we hope will be a lively discussion and a fun discussion and a heartfelt and much needed discussion about a film that sparked a lot of questions. And I think the first place I'll start is for Jay and for Anna. Walk us through just the origins and the process of creating the project.
Thanks, Julian. So the origin of the project really was, goes back a few years to when this collective of artists, poets and dancers, with Anna, and I actually participated in the early stages of this in developing it, but made a performance piece that was called Invisible Imprints of Racism. And it was an hour-long piece that got a chance to tour quite a bit around the country. And there was a tour that went from Jackson, Mississippi to Chicago, up along the Great Migration Trail, along the Mississippi River. And at that point, I decided I really want to take a film crew with me, shoot it, and see what would happen when the artists were experiencing the Deep South for the first time, experiencing America's racial history in a different way from the way they had experienced it in the school systems in Massachusetts that they'd all come up through, we all had. And then the effect of that on all of us, but particularly the people of color who are in the company. And so that, turned out to be quite profound. And we were interviewing civil rights leaders along the way whose stories hadn't been told. And so that's in process of becoming a documentary film. When COVID struck, this group all got together and said, what can we do to continue this discussion about this thing we all care a lot about, which is racism? And so we gathered up on a basketball court at the Bromley Heath Housing Development in Boston, Roxbury, for 2 days, hottest weekend of July, with masks to take pieces of this piece that toured, but then under Anna's direction added a new piece, and collaborating with one of our Black dancers and the poets developing some new pieces, which is really about their own stories.
And a cellist, Bach.
And a terrific Boston cellist who was playing Bach. And then see if we could, so I had 4 shooters and we went for about 16 or 17 hours over those 2 days, and then tried to put that together in a way that would really try to move people along the way a live performance does, which is try to touch upon those emotional sides of racism, get people out of their heads, but to feel. And the dance, of course, and the music and the poetry is so powerful at doing that.
Also, just a little bit about our organization. Our organization is called BeHeard.World, and it's an umbrella for performing arts and film to give voice to communities and individuals and ideas that should be seen and heard. It's a group of artists, dancers, poets, filmmakers who want to make a difference in the world and to start conversations about racism. So that's who we are.
And this one, I was just curious. So if you have this momentum and sort of this inspiration from a project you're already working on, right? And it's halted by COVID, right? And then not only by COVID, but like just a groundswell of just a boiling over of frustrations after years of racial insensitivity, social injustice that happens at the exact same time. What does that do for your creative process and how you actually process things as you're trying to decide what to do while time is essentially standing still, you know? Yeah. And that's for everybody here, obviously.
Yeah, maybe we should turn that over to Greg or Amanda.
Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can answer that question from on my end. So in the midst of all of that happening, in the midst of going through the migration trail, hearing the stories of those that traveled before us, and then right before COVID drops, the police thing goes even more haywire, and then COVID drops, and it makes it even harder for us to even have a creative outlet. I feel like the drive is something similar to what Nina Simone said. Like, as an artist, we're supposed to reflect the times. That's our job. So like, because all this stuff was happening, it was like that was the momentum itself. We as all artists found the mediums that we needed to reflect what we were feeling, what was happening around us. So it's kind of like when you hear artists certain say, like, when they're sad, they do their best art. It's like when we're pushed against the wall, having to see all this stuff happening around us, there was no need for us to even think about it. We reflexively was ready to create.
How about yourself, man?
Amanda?
Might be frozen.
Okay, I think you're frozen.
That is one side effect of the quarantine. That is I've seen more frozen screens in the last 11 months. But
can you hear me?
Yeah, a little spotty, but yeah.
Give it another shot.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, internet issues.
It's
I
a part of
agree with
quarantine.
Greg, as Nina Simone. I'm sorry?
I said it's a part of quarantine, no problem.
Indeed it is. I agree with what Greg said. I think for all of us, we found those emotions where we were able to not only be able to see it for first witness.
I think we lost her again. We'll try to get her back in. And I'll just ask it again. No worries. It's one of the most common frustrations of Zooms family Zooms, game nights. It just happens. For Greg though, I will follow up. So sometimes they say isolation is a bad thing, isolation is a good thing. The only thing I know for sure about it is that you get a lot of time to think, right? And just in hearing your words and hearing your voice, you're a thinker. I would take it. How was this process? How was that time to think helpful, especially in kind of reframing the work that you have been doing and kind of taking steps towards it?
Thank you for acknowledging me as a thinker. I am quite an avid thinker. I actually spent a lot of my time in isolation just thinking. So it was a lot more of now time for action versus thinking.
Gotcha.
In a time where everybody else is having the time to themselves to reflect on themselves, I've spent enough time to know what my capacity was. So it was like, let me be one of the people to start off in action. Let me be one of the people to give off an example of what to do after you come out of isolation.
And I think now just find me at the pickup point where you guys decide, all right, we got a location, we're gonna go to the courts. As you guys explained to me, it was wild hot outside. You picked an amazing day. You're probably seeing a large group of people for the first time, and you have this massive project and also topic to tackle. Like, what was it like to, one, be around people, and then also have to like wrangle with, you know, the feelings of what you're about to embark on?
Well, I'll jump in a little bit on that. You know, because we hadn't been together for a good while, and we're all eager to see each other. You know, after you spend a lot of condensed time together, like we did on these tours and making that film, you see everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But there was just a lot of affection, and it's amazing how different we are in age and
race
and ethnicity, that we do have this bond. So there was a lot of eagerness, I think, to get together and then try to figure out how in a very condensed time, make a statement and be able to do a project. And so it was intense. It was very intense, and it was, super hot. So it was, everyone was pressed hard, I would say, a lot of sweat, a lot of water, and pushing each other pretty hard. But in spite of it all, I think everybody felt at the end of it that we were able to do what we set out to do.
And, basketball courts aren't unfamiliar to us. We often make them into theaters and perform on them. So especially the Bromley Heath court is a nice court to be on. So that was sort of like a second home to us anyway. And the cellist we've worked with a lot, with other violin and cellists, people who find it actually a breath of fresh air to be doing projects that are like this as opposed to the symphony. This was not an unfamiliar project to him either. In seeing that it was sort of, some of it was practiced on Zoom beforehand and it was sort of thrown together, I think we managed to do a pretty good job of getting it done, and even through the heat and through COVID and keeping a distance from each other, even though, that was not so simple, but we did. Anyway.
Let me try to go back to Amanda and your creative process. How are we looking with the sound, audio, Zoom, technology, 2021? Is it going to agree with us right now? That's right.
Clearly, I've been having tech issues all of 2021, but if you can hear me now, this is great.
Sounds perfect.
I have moved. I put my arm all the way up. I licked my finger before I did it, and then I turned to the side, and it came back.
It's the side. The side is what does it, and it's the side by a window. That's what gets you done.
Exactly. Lots of light. Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to go backwards. Just I was curious. You were starting to talk about just the creative process and picking it up in a pandemic, and in a time of social unrest. But feel free.
Yes, being creative in the pandemic has definitely been challenging. I think it's hard to necessarily be motivated every single day, especially when you see the climate of which we're living in, not only with Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, but also with the pandemic itself. We've seen a lot of things happening and witnessed a lot of things happening. And for me, it was really hard to dig deep and get to the core, I should say. I think sometimes as an artist, I struggle with wanting to be able to convey the messages in a positive way, but with understanding, but with also realism to myself. And it's really difficult to do that when you're witnessing all of this devastation happening all around you. Creating this together 6 feet apart was really difficult. Even just images of when we were on tour constantly flash back in my mind. Those are some of the things that we can't forget. And then on top of it being in 90-degree weather, and then also just having to deal with the realities that we can't even hug each other. It was really, really difficult, but I think it made us grow individually and collectively as a whole, because we leaned on each other in those moments of difficulty.
That's a great point. Again, this is probably one of the first times you're interacting with a large group of people on a project, people that you know, that you work with, that you've gone across the country with. And as the title kind of makes clear, yeah, you're together, but you're 6 feet apart. And if you're trying to unleash some of these emotions, right? Like uncork, unbottle some of these emotions that you might be feeling that you may not have had the chance to, and you have 2 days to do it, what are some of the ways where you're just like, it is good to see your face? I do want to talk about these things. I am glad to see you. Had you been communicating, whether it was by text, by Zoom, whatever it may have been at the time, and was like, man, like, how do I do this? Because we're about to, again, like, these are personal stories you tell that resonate in a lot of ways to a lot of different people at the time, but these are still personal stories that you're about to unleash. How do you do that and then say, that was a lot, but please, you got to give me 6 feet, you know?
Okay, I can answer that part. To be honest, I think it's the fact that we're family. Like, even though it was 6 feet, we were 6 feet apart from each other. Like, some people I haven't seen in like a year and a half. It was just the joy of being able to see each other's faces, the joy of being able to see each other laugh, to be in each other's presence. Like, a lot of us have a lot of other talents. So like, while the dancers are dancing, or some people are working on phrases, other people are trying to make music, and just dancing, still being 6 feet apart. So it just shows how like the 6 feet apart kept us from touching each other, but it didn't keep the love or the joy that we had for each other. So I think that's the thing that allows us to tackle such a difficult topic and on such a personal point from a lot of people, especially from the writers. So it was just like being with family is to set the atmosphere for some greatness.
Anybody else want to chime in? Or?
Agreed with trying to keep Amanda slightly back from grabbing onto people.
Say it one more time.
Amanda was like so happy to see everybody. She was like almost lunging.
That's awesome.
Pull her back.
Amanda's the chief hugger in here.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes, that is accurate. I love hugs. You get to feel energy that way. They did have to hold me back though. I agree with what Greg said too. And I also believe that Jay and Anna do a really good job with group texting us and giving us like, you know, keeping us abreast of like what's going on from their perspective and what they're seeing. They're always giving us articles to read. I feel like we're constantly doing research in a sense, but it's all related. It's all relative. Greg's laughing because it's true. It's all relative though. And we stay in the group chat. The group chat is so huge that I've had to like delete and come back because it takes up a lot of storage. But we're constantly sending each other like images, photos, keeping tabs on one another, staying in close proximity, as close as we can, obviously, through email and through text. So I constantly feel like I'm connected to them, even when we might not see each other in person. So that's like always a beautiful thing for me to be a part of this. And as Greg said, all of us kind of do so many different things. We create in so many different ways. So I think when we weren't creating with Be Heard, we were all in our own independent projects, or even working with other people within our group, because a lot of us are known to do that as well, and working on other endeavors to kind of keep our minds busy and just creating from a good space.
I think I should also remind people, and mostly myself, that there is a Q&A button here in this fancy smancy Zoom, and we will check in, pull some questions so you guys can answer later. In the meantime, I do have a question. You mentioned family, Greg, and I thought that was interesting because as tie-in, these are, again, your poems were very personal, you know, and tied in a lot to, I thought one of the fascinating things, Amanda, was how you incorporated just like your own family experience, you know what I mean, and how complicated that can make the world seem, especially at a time like this. But one, how much of that was work that you had done through the Invisible Project, and then how much of it was stuff that you had been sitting with as you guys were developing this project during the quarantine? And for yourself, how much of it was, all right, this is what I worked on here, but this is what I'm thinking about now, you know? Uh-oh. I always get worried. I'm never sure. Zoom terrifies me. I never know when I lost somebody. I'm telling you.
That was a good question. That was a good question. That was a really good question, actually. To be honest, a lot of it is just someone allowing us to have an outlet or some place to let certain things out. Like, I really didn't drive a car after the whole Black people getting pulled over by police. That was a real thing for me. Like, my wife drives my car. That's great. Right? Like, if I see blue and flashing lights for a whole year, it was like, nah, I'm good. I'm not. Like, that was a traumatizing thing for me. So, like, in my poem, like, I never got a chance to express it. So when Anna and them gave us a chance to bring it up again, it was like, word, I have a way to express this, because my poem, it's a little bit weird, but you don't notice I'm in a therapy session and I still feel the need to put my hands up and make my therapist feel comfortable while telling him why I hesitated to get into my car. So it was just like a lot of it was just like real life things that no one has allowed us or given us a platform to kind of give out, or even a prompt to kind of let it out. So like a lot of it came from like past, a little bit of the present, and then a future of like, I'm not going to just sit here in the dread. I'm trying to focus on like, what can we look past this? Like, what's something that I could give or something I can learn about that can help us lead to something further? So like the epigenetics and how that affects your DNA and the environment. That's me trying to show people that there is a science to help us find an answer for the reasons why so much of this stuff is happening to us. So like, let's try to look to that light, even though this is kind of what a basic Black person is going through on a day-to-day basis.
Feel free to chime in as well. No worries. So I think that to me was the part that was fascinating about the parts of the project for sure. Especially once I learned that this was already in the works, and this was and that Together was sort of a product of the pandemic. But you guys had already been working through. If you go back to, let's say, 2013, if you guys began 2015, you said 2016 on Invisible. There are already issues of social justice, police brutality, just really horrible stuff that wasn't new to the country, but was being magnified because of a ridiculous set of circumstances with the president and a group of people charged up by it, right? But that almost felt like either separate or like a massive buildup to what happened in 2020. Like, did it feel that way for you in the process of like, all right, the things that we were working on and thinking about as we were working on Invisible either are a buildup to what we thought about last year or like completely separate from it? You know what I mean? Like, and that 2020 was its own horrible and yet like it was a moment where you had to decide what you were going to do and how you were going to think about it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me. So if it doesn't, I can clear it up. But boy, 2020 felt like its own thing, that it was a breaking point for a lot of people.
I feel like 2020 to a certain degree did feel like its own thing. However, I think within this production and doing and working with Be Heard, I feel like we were building up to 2020. Yeah. For me anyway, I don't want to speak on anybody else, but for me, that's how I felt. Because we're constantly looking at the history, we're constantly going through and touring places that held artifacts in our history and all of this legacy that was devastating. And we're seeing this and we're like, well, we're looking around at each other like, well, what are we doing right now? Like, this is part of our work, and I feel like art is also a form of resistance. So for us, it was also like artivism in a way where we're using our art as a form of activism. But like, to what part are we going to be able to say? I don't think any of us seen 2020 happening in the ways that it was going to happen, but we knew that something was bubbling under the surface. I feel like we wanted to be a part of the change and where we're going to go, and where we're still trying to head to. But I think for me, it was just like, oh, this is the breaking point. And this feels like something new.
I mean, also, I started doing this work in 2007, and I mean, this stuff has been going on for hundreds of years. you know, I've seen Boston be a divided city. You know, as I said to you the other day, Julian, that you know, both Jay and I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and you know, this stuff was going on then. You know, to be honest, to see people marching in the streets in 2020 was so uplifting for me, to see people having a voice and speaking out, and actually seeing white people out there with Black people, Black and brown people, was refreshing to me. This is far too long to be going on. So I feel like some of the work we've been doing, you know, I wouldn't like to say that we were ahead of our time, but right now is a perfect time for this work to continue and to keep talking and to keep, you know, I mean, that's why we wanted to do this piece on the basketball court 6 feet apart, because how do we, even during COVID, but after doing COVID, keep talking about what's happening instead of it just dribbling away and not making a difference. And so whatever, I mean, that's, I guess, all I have to say.
I would agree with all that, and just emphasize that, you know, racism is so dehumanizing, but and we experienced that pretty profoundly when we were in the Deep South and moving up to Chicago, and that particular tour, really learning about things that we just don't learn in schools.
Historical stuff
in particular. But you know, it got so poignant that, you know, the dehumanization, suddenly it came out in a way that suddenly a lot of people were waking up to it. But I think we were already very committed to doing it. It just, as Amanda said, it just seemed like the next thing. We were ready to go. It wasn't like, oh, we suddenly now have to turn our attention to this. It was just a continuation.
Now that's one more before we get to some of the Q&A questions. I don't think, I think I'm letting the cat out of the bag here a little bit, Jay and Anna. You're white, and this is a film about Black history. I don't think that's a secret. I don't think I'm like shocking anybody. It's a Zoom for that, after all. But I think we talked about this yesterday too, which was one of the themes that kind of wrapped up the film was forgiveness, and another one was unity, right? And those are both realistic and like not unreasonable aims. They might not necessarily be the aims of everyone in the country right now, but they're not unreasonable and they're very hopeful, right? But at the same time, is it difficult to present that idea right now, right? For a lot of different reasons, whether it's because some people might not want it, whether it's because some people might not feel like forgiveness is something that has been earned yet, whether unity is something that is possible, you know what I mean? Like, how was it to kind of wrestle with that idea? It's like, yeah, I would like everybody to get along, and the world is better if we do, but is this like a feasible thing right now? It's not unreasonable, but is it something that's worth asking of people, but is also something that's realistic to ask of people? Does that make sense?
You mean to talk about about racism? Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm. Or particularly whether in asking people to talk about it, if it would include, are we willing to come around, gather around it with the concept of unity and forgiveness?
Of unity and forgiveness, yeah. I think because right now, I think there's so many different ideas of what should happen and what can't happen, right? Like, there's an entire group of people who don't want to unify at all, right? Like, they will storm the White House if they have to, right? There's an entire group of people who may not feel forgiveness has been earned, you know what I mean? And it's still very fragmented. The feelings are very raw. They're still very magnified. It's almost like you still got to cool down for 2020 to just think about all these ideas that you're presenting, you know what I mean?
Well,
go ahead, Jay.
No, you go ahead, actually.
Oh, I was gonna say, actually, it's in the name of the company. Be heard. I think the concept is being heard. I don't think the concept is trying to push whether forgiveness or unity. It's the concept of that we're going to present everything for everything to be heard. So that way we can now move more human-like. I feel like a lot of the time we're moving really robotic-like because we're spoon-fed knowledge. And I feel like Anna Myers and Jay have created a platform to where everybody and everything can be heard. And it allowed me to even reach even further to like do pieces where I'm bringing in Native American culture, because everything needs to be put on the table in order for anything to be a conversation. So whether it's forgiveness, whether it's unity, whether it's separation, whether it's leaving the country, it's like before we can talk about a decision, I think everyone of every race needs to know what actually happened, what the facts are, and how can we as humans make a decision on how to move forward.
And abolishing, to add on to that, like abolishing isms and phobias. I think I named that in my last piece as well, as far as unity. It's like we have to start looking at each other as human first. You know, that's, no matter which way you want to slice it, that's what we are before you see it. We're humans, like human beings, human lives. So I think from that perspective, I think you're right. It's very fragmented. And I do believe that there are people out there that do not want unity, but I also feel that there are way more people who do want unity than not.
Yeah, and the thing is that confronting racism is uncomfortable, and I don't think it's meant to be comfortable. I think it's part of, you know, when you tell the truth about something that's difficult and that's really ugly and has a long, terrible history. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And it also doesn't mean that beyond that, there's something to strive for. And I think as a group, we've all felt that. And I think that the only way we would go forward if we all could agree as a group, all 14 people who were involved in this project.
You know, also just I was thinking, one thing that I have been surprised about is most of our performances on the tour or in Boston, it's been difficult to get people out of the theater. And, you know, because people who run the theater say, you know, an hour's up, you guys got to get out. And, you know, people aren't ready to leave. And I've been really warmly surprised by that. And a mixture of Black and white people talking. And, you know, as much as there are a group of people out there that don't want to mix, I think I think these pieces hopefully are affirming to the Black and brown community, because I think it's so important to be heard and understood is key, but also that I think there are white people out there who want to be part of that discussion and want a way to step in, and how do we help and how do we change? And so I'm sort of hoping that our work gives people a platform for that. So far, you know, we've had some really, really good discussions afterwards. So anyway.
I think let's fire off some of these Q&A entries here. One, this one's a straightforward one. How intentional was, and you mentioned the sort of an analogy about dribbling, which I thought was neat. How intentional was the decision to film on a basketball court?
Extremely. We wanted to be, the Bromley Heath basketball court is, it's part of the, I'm not sure if it's the largest, but it's got to be one of the 2 or 3 largest public housing developments in the city of Boston. It's in Roxbury. You know, we wanted to be there because I think it represents a place that has, you know, evolved from racism. You know, it's an institution that's come out of the housing divisions in Boston, but it's true of every city in America.
It's where youth go. And
yeah, it's also where, you know, it's also a place where, you know, it's a forum where, you know, young people are testing themselves in the basketball court and where people hang out, and it just seemed like the right place.
We also, often serve food beforehand, so that, because food brings people.
Right.
And so, you know, it's kind of a nice evening. People can eat and see art and talk. Matter of fact, the whole idea of the basketball court was, I think, the second meeting Jay and I ever had together. We first met, sitting in a car and inventing ideas of ways to make change. And we, before we fell in love, we discussed being on a basketball court. Matter of fact, I think it was the day that, well, maybe I should, never mind. I won't say anymore.
I'm halfway curious, were the hoops up or down? Had they taken the hoops down on the court?
Oh no, they're up.
They were up? Nice.
Yeah.
Take them up. Another is, I think you touched on this a little bit obviously too, but how did the group come together in the first place? How large is the group and what is next?
Well, we have 12 artists, 9 dancers, hip hop and modern, and 3 poets. We have a new project coming up that we're working on that's going to be, I don't know, larger in terms of musicians, and 1 extra rapper voice person. And we try not to get larger than that, but I don't know. It just seems to be the right group, the right amount of people.
Hold on, wait, nah, Anna is selling herself short. Anna Myers is the person that put the whole group together. My favorite part about talking about this company is having a person that can view what all these different disciplines can do together before they can. Right. Anna Myers is very good at binding people together. Like, she happened to find really good dancers that happened to know me and Amanda. You know what I mean? It happens, like, she happened to put herself in the company of great, talented people, and then she allows them to completely creatively express, which then draws other people who are willing to even want to create them and also want to express. So, like, it is all Anna Myers. I don't know if she's under me, but in my Zoom, she's under me. That's why I was going like this.
You guys, all at the bottom. That's a good point. I think I was saying yesterday, I was like, even while you guys were performing, I would look in the background and it was striking, the dancer in the background. I was like, what you doing back there? And I thought that it came together, even if what was happening, even if it felt dissonant, it felt connected the same way. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you know, mixing the dance forms together. I mean, it took a long time to sort of really understand how to mix hip hop and modern together. And of course, I don't choreograph the hip hop, but how they move together and how they interlace and what they express is, it's like having a million colors and a million paintbrushes. It's so magnificent with the poetry. Just FYI, the solo that happened with Greg's poem, I did not choreograph, and Ronnie Thomas choreographed it. I felt like this was something that, considering the nature of the poetry and him being a Black man and me being white, I felt like this is something that I should not do. There's another solo that I did a little teeny bit of, but mostly Adrienne Brayton, who's with the white poet and the white dancer. She choreographed that as well. So
we got about 5 minutes left, and 2 more questions. I think both actually pretty interesting. So I was going to say, did you develop a specific dance vocabulary related to race, and what was that specifically?
Did you develop a certain dance category?
Vocabulary is what the question. Did you develop a specific dance vocabulary related to race, and what was that specifically?
Well, let's see. You know, I make phrases. Phrases are like sentences of putting different movement together, and sometimes it comes from the poetry. Sometimes it's overlaid over the poetry, vice versa with music. But I often give phrases to the dancers And I asked them to turn them upside down or make them go backwards or morph them. I even give phrases to hip hop dancers and ask them to shift them, do whatever. Sometimes I give the dancers an idea, could they make some phrases? And so it's, you know, kind of a mixture of things. I have to say, if I sort of am the architect of the pieces. Jay and I work a lot together with the poets and the subject matter and what they want to say and what the larger subject matter of the piece. So it becomes a larger collaboration. I have to say the one thing that I'm really, I think very good at is making people cry, making people feel. And my pieces have some kind of timing to them, or I don't know what it is, but my most important thing is to make people feel so that people can walk away and somehow you've changed them and made them understand or more empathetic or whatever. But it is a group that's working together, and I couldn't do it without them. And, you know, anyway, it's sort of a magical group of people, really.
And the last one's a broad one for everybody. Do you think the arts, this is pretty broad, do you think the arts will play a role in dismantling systemic racism?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Art makes people feel. And
yes.
Open it up and can talk.
Like, art is what brought down Berlin Wall. Art is what transforms culture. Art needs a different word for its ability to pierce the mind and express. So yes, art is going to be the thing that leads into the next, because artists are trend setters, and they're also trend writers. So like, as long as you allow the artists to keep expressing themselves freely, we will find a way of destroying walls, destroying prisons, destroying all types of oppression, because that's Black resilience, right? Because that's not how we've come from the slave trade through here. You see our art. Our art was in the plantation. Our art was in segregation. Our art is in radios that play nationally around the world now. Our art is something, art for us is definitely something that has an ability to transform. Just want to put that out there.
I mean, a lot of the Renaissance, right? Like Harlem, Chicago, we can keep going, right? But also I feel like art is vulnerability. It is really, really hard to not want to understand someone when they are being the most vulnerable selves, period. So I feel like that is going to definitely heal the world and transform culture, as Greg said. So that's how we tell our stories. And that's how we show our true selves, is through art. It's transformative. It's really, really hard to deny that.
If racism is dehumanizing, art is the opposite. Art is humanizing. You know, it gets people to really to feel, transports you to an emotional place that, you know, when people change or reconsider their thoughts and positions, it's really because they've had something that resonates emotionally. Nothing can do that like art.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was fun. I hope you had a good time, because I did. I hope it did it justice. I appreciate you guys giving me a peek at the film. I hope everybody out there enjoyed it as well. And let's, I like the idea together 6 feet apart, but let's put our hands together for the idea of being together, just together, you know, like one of these days, and that'll be nice too. So you guys keep pushing. Thank you for letting me have some of your time. And thank you, everybody out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.